everyone. Thank you so much again for joining us. This is a podcast natin. Let's go deep dive as always, and we have a privilege today of having again with us Justice Antonio Carpio. I say again because I have him also on other platforms. I really suggest everyone to check also yung comprehensive interview natin. I think 2 oras yung interview natin, no? Dun sa One News View from Manila natin. Yung mga gusto nila ng one-on-one West Philippine Sea, yung kasaysayan ng West Philippine Sea, from Ramos administration onwards, please watch it. Justice Carpio provides an excellent overview of the situation there. Kamusta kayo, Justice? Are you inspired nowadays or ano? Kamustang?
Well, I'm happy that the direction of our foreign policy is taking the correct course, taking the correct course.
Yes, Justice. Of course, before we talk about a couple of things relevant sa West Philippine Sea, kasama dyan, of course, yung possibility for additional lawfare moves on the part of the Philippines. And of course, ito yung mga latest development rin sa West Philippines, yung mga bullying na naman ang ginagawa ng China. Pag-usapan natin ng sandali, Justice Carpio. First of all, what do you make out of President Marcos Jr.'s presenting the keynote speech at the Shangri-La Dialogue this year? And this is arguably the most important security dialogue in the Asian region, and I would say along with the Munich Security Conference, among the most prominent. What do you make out of the fact that Philippines was chosen to give this speech? Is it a recognition of Marcos Jr.'s foreign policy direction, or is it also a recognition of the Philippines' importance as a regional player? Not to mention us, calling out China's bullying.
Well, I think it's because we're the subject of confrontation now with China. We are suffering in the hands of China at sea. The Chinese are issuing more regulations to tighten their control in the South China Sea, and we are the receiving end of these regulations. So, for foreign observers, it looks like that the battle is between China and the Philippines, between a Goliath and David.
And Justice, we'll go a little bit more into this later on about Marcos Jr. himself, but do you feel this is the natural place for the Philippines? Because we're the only liberal democracy in Southeast Asia, no offense to Indonesia, Malaysia, and the rest. We are a U.S. treaty ally, and we are the only Southeast Asian, we're the only Asian country to have taken China to international court over a major dispute. So, do you think this is the natural place for the Philippines? And in retrospect, the Duterte era was really a deviation and deviant in that sense, yeah.
Yes, I think this is the natural course for us. This is actually a correction. Because during the time of Duterte, we
Course
really
correction. Yeah, course correction. Perfect way of putting it.
this is a course correction. During the time of Duterte, we really tilted towards Beijing, even at the expense of our national interest. But now we're making a course correction, and that is why Beijing is very mad, very angry at us, because we have decided to look at our national interest first. We are no longer subordinating our national interests to China's expansionist dreams.
Justice Carver, I want to ask also about your opinion on the China side of the equation, because the speeches when I say speeches, it's because it's not only Defense Chief Admiral Dong who spoke. Literally, all of their generals were trolling everyone, including the keynote speaker Marcos. So they were like ranting. They were not just asking questions during the Q&A. But before that, I want to ask about the keynote speech itself. Because Marcos Jr. emphasized, favorite term natin yan, strategic agency. Siguro nakikinig sa atin yung mga speechwriter ni BBM. But more importantly, there was a part where BBM said, making a choice is not, parang, it's not possible to really make a choice only between US and China, in a sense that we want to have good relationship with everyone, and that both US and China are important for peace and stability in this part of the world. Do you think that was also a way of us saying to the rest of ASEAN na hindi naman kami nandito na team US versus team China? We're still an ASEAN country. We want to hedge. We want to have good relationship. Except China is forcing our hand. Do you think it was important for BBM to say that side? Kasi para hindi tayo lumabas na outlier in ASEAN.
Yeah, I think not only he was addressing not only ASEAN but also China. That
Right.
we are not really we don't want to fight China. I mean, nobody wants to fight China. We are just defending our own territory and maritime zones. Want to continue trading with China, and we're trying to isolate this maritime and territorial dispute uh, from our trade and economic relations with China as far as we can. No? So we're sending a message to China that what we are not really taking sides here. We're just defending our own interests.
And Justice, what do you make out of the speech by Admiral Dong of China, where he said, "Our patience is not unlimited"? You think that was a not so veiled warning that they may resort to kinetic action dito sa West Philippine Sea? Or what's going on there? Empty talk lang ba to?
Well, that's part of their strategy of intimidation. It's continuing. China intimidates us by sending its big warships to our economic zone, and also intimidates us in words, like what this general said at the Shangri-La Forum. I mean, our patience is not unlimited. What they've been threatening us before. They would say that there will be war. Even Duterte conveyed it to us. But that's part of their strategy. If you fall for this intimidation, you lose, as keep on saying. We just have to look at their strategy, and their strategy is to intimidate.
Right. So what you're saying is wag natin seryosohin masyado itong mga veiled or not so veiled threat ng China dahil ano lang psychological warfare lang ito. Hindi ito nakakabahala in a sense na baka desperado ng China at baka gagawa sila ng kalokohan.
No, I think China knows that we have a mutual defense treaty with the U.S. The last thing they would want to do is to give the U.S. an excuse to intervene in the South China Sea dispute. And in the three warfare strategy of China, it's very clear. Their plan is to win the South China Sea without firing a single shot. That means they will use intimidation, and they're ratcheting up they're increasing their intimidation because we refuse to be intimidated.
And what do you make of these statements by Lloyd Austin, the Defense Secretary of the United States? Do you think he made the proper balance of making sure he reassures the Philippines and at the same time warns China without also undermining communication channels with the Chinese? Because this was the first meeting he had with his Chinese counterpart in 18 months. I mean, ibang tao na to in charge. Nakatatlong reshuffle na yung defense ministry nila by this time. The reason I'm asking that is Justice Carr is because I've also been asked about, during the question and answer portion, si Lloyd Austin was a bit coy. Sabi niya, I don't want to go into hypotheticals when he was asked about the Mutual Defense Treaty's relevance to the Philippine-China disputes. I just found that weird in a sense that, I mean, Biden already said, we will, the Mutual Defense Treaty applies kung inatake yung public vessels natin. So, do you think he was unnecessarily coy or because he wanted to make sure he has open channels with the Chinese after the first time in the 8 months, he didn't want to overdo it since Biden already said it? I mean, at least that's my position. How do you read Lloyd Austin's interventions?
Well, he has already repeatedly said that the Mutual Defense Treaty applies to the South China Sea. We're covered. We can invoke it if there's an armed attack on our Coast Guard vessels, including our Coast Guard vessels, naval ships, and armed forces. So I think he just didn't want to reiterate it again. So he just wanted to cut off that discussion. But he has been very strong in reiterating the U.S. position to reassure the Philippines. And I think what he did was really to counter the Chinese statement of intimidation, that you cannot do that. I mean, we're not people who can be intimidated.
Yeah, the Filipino doesn't yield, right? He was very clear. I will not yield. The Filipino doesn't. That was very clear. Well, the speech went down very well with observers from across the region, especially from fellow democracies and countries who understood the stakes here. Speaking of fellow democracies and countries that who can understand us, the highlight of the Shangri-La dialogue, of course, was a surprise visit by President Zelenskyy of Ukraine, who came in with his trademark olive green camouflage T-shirt and all of that. And he made many interesting interventions, including implying that China is lying when it says it's neutral because it's helping Russia and accusing China of disrupting efforts by Ukraine to invite more and more countries to the peace summit coming up later this month. Before I go to Zelensky's visit to Manila and his meeting with BBM and asking about, I also want to get your point of view on this. Kasi ang nakakabahala sa akin, Justice Carpio, is the propaganda of Kremlin, particularly Putin, is that ang Ukraine ay pasimuno, silang troublemaker dahil they were flirting with NATO. So in order to defend themselves, they had to make that preemptive invasion. They call it special military operation. Now, where this thing gets more ridiculous is China is also painting itself as surrounded by so-called an Asian NATO. I mean, that's a statement that Admiral Dong, among others, used, which is ito yung AUKUS, itong Philippine Quadrilateral Squad, ito yung sinasabi ko na JAFUS. So, don't you think China is trying to set the predicate by saying, oh, we're facing also something similar to what Russia is facing, and therefore Taiwan, Philippines are just like Ukraine and troublemakers?
Well, there is a parallelism there.
Yeah.
Russia and China are actually trying to overturn the international
World order. Yeah,
established,
world order. Yeah. Yeah.
established under the 1945 UN Charter. There are two foundational principles under the UN Charter. All disputes between states must be settled peacefully by negotiation, mediation, or arbitration, and the use of force or the threat of force is outlawed. And in Russia, in Ukraine, Russia is trying to settle a dispute by invading another country by using force, actual force, which is totally outlawed by the United Nations, and that's why in the General Assembly that was overwhelmingly voted condemned by all countries except for four. No, Russia just got 4 votes.
Eritrea, Syria, North Korea, I mean, usual suspects, right? Yeah.
And in Asia, in Southeast Asia, China is doing the same thing by threat of force, trying to settle a territorial and maritime dispute in the South China Sea by threat of force. So these are both actions that will overturn, if they succeed, it will overturn the existing international legal order established by the 1945 UN Charter. And I think they must have talked. President Xi and Putin must have talked. You
Yeah.
do this there and we'll do it here.
Yeah.
And if they succeed, you can just imagine what will happen to the world. I mean, we will be back to the regime before the 1945 UN Charter, and that was the right. That was the might is right. In other words, if you have a dispute with another country, you just invade that country. If you win the war, then what you did was correct, and you're rewarded with the territory of that country. I mean, it was the law of the jungle in effect, and the mighty, the strongest animal will survive or will win. And that is what these two actions of China and Russia will lead the world. So I think it was very instructive that Zelenskyy came to Manila, attended the Shangri-La Forum. The way I look at it, it's really the intersection, these two forces, Russia and China trying to overturn the existing legal order, came to a crossroad here. And Zelenskyy was actually saying what's happening in the South China Sea is equivalent in a way to what is happening in Ukraine, because if China and Russia succeed, they will overturn the existing legal order. And you can just imagine what will happen to Europe if their territorial disputes will be settled by war. You can just imagine.
We're back to the
Russia's
19th
claiming-
century. Yeah, we're back to the Crimean War era and all of that. Yeah.
And that led to 2 world wars, and that will lead to a 3rd world war. And that I think people have not understood this development. That we cannot allow China and Russia to succeed in overturning this basic foundation of the UN Charter. The reason why the internationalists who framed the UN Charter inserted this because they said if the might is right regime continues, there will be surely a third world war
Yeah.
sooner or later.
And worse than ever because of the advancements in weapon systems,
Yeah,
aside
because
from nuclear weapons. Yeah.
countries have nuclear weapons already. So that is actually that is really what is at stake. The way I look at it, that is really what is at stake in the South China Sea. We are not fighting for our own maritime zone only. We're fighting for this basic principle that has kept world peace for the last 79 years. And I think that's why all the European countries are supporting Ukraine because they realize the consequences of Russia establishing the the principle that to settle a dispute, all I have to do is to invade that country.
And make up some blah 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 story about once upon a time
Yeah,
you were part of our empire. I mean that's a slippery slope, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly what Putin said that we have a right to recover lands where the Slavic people once lived. I
Yeah.
mean, they'll go all the way to the U.S. because to Canada because the no, uh, the Vikings reached Canada also.
Well, just on that point, closer to Russia's territory, a former Mongolian prime minister posted a picture of Mongolian Empire, which had much of Russia and Middle East and China. So like it was a sarcastic comment that if you want to go down that road, be careful what you wish for, right? Because there was no Russia until the fall of the Golden Horde. Going back to this, Justice Carpio. Now, I posted something about the picture between Zelensky and Marcos, and then I called him a warrior president because I mean this is a guy who has multiple assassination plots against him. He stayed with his own family, with his young kids. This is not a performative kind of president. Unlike some president I know, no, nung tapos ng gyera sa Marawi, biglang magdamit-damit-damit siya ng camouflage papunta dyan na obviously hindi pa kasya sa kanyang damit niya. But speaking of comedian president, that's the attack on Zelensky. I mean, I find it interesting coming from very people, right? Whose idol is former President Duterte, who showed no backbone whatsoever in standing up to China, the power that is actually bullying us, not the United States, not the Western powers. I mean, those countries have done their own mistakes around the world, sure, but so what's going on here, Justice Carpio? Why the pro Duterte camp, I don't know, pro Kremlin, who knows how far this goes? They are very sensitive about this whole Zelensky thing. They want to dismiss him as a puppet, as a comedian, as a joke. Parang sabi nila, ito na yung picture ng dalawang puppet ng West, si BBM, anak ng dating dictator, ito naman, bagong dictator. I mean, what's going on there? Do you think it's because they're triggered, they're worried, or they're just useful idiots, as the Soviets would put it? What's going on here?
Yeah, it's really difficult to understand why they're so mad at the visit of Zelensky here,
Yeah.
and I really cannot understand that. Why suddenly they've become so mad? But
Triggered eh, oo.
between Zelensky and Putin, you understand who is the murderer and who is not, who is the law-abiding citizen there. I mean, if there is any comparison, it's Duterte and Putin because they've been responsible for the killing of their own people.
Yeah. And Duterte called Putin invariably as his ultimate idol, his everything, right? Protect me, blah blah blah. So, wow. But it's also that the National Democratic Front also released a statement a while ago. An editor of mine, because I was writing an article and this forwarded to me. I mean, I usually do not pay attention to press releases by NDF or those types of people. Just to read what they said, it's along the lines of. I want to read it directly because I find it's very interesting to put it nicely, Justice Carpio. So, ang statement po ng National Democratic Front is, Zelensky's visit is part of U.S. design to portray Marcos Jr. as new poster boy for war versus China. First of all, it's a very long title. I don't think basic journalism tells you to write titles like that. Just the first paragraph, please bear with me, folks. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's recent visit to Malacanang as part of U.S. imperialist war designs to portray Marcos as a new poster boy for its proxy war versus China. The Marcos Jr. media stunt exposes U.S. imperialism use of puppet regimes such as the Philippines and Ukraine to advance its geopolitical ambitions. By aligning Marcos Jr. as a parallel of Zelensky, the U.S. is positioning the Philippines as a key player in its broader strategy to counter its, or in fairness, imperialist rival China. So that's the only difference with the DDS camp, because the DDS camp will never call China imperialist. But at least these guys had the decency to accept China is also imperialist. Yeah.
Well, I think the parallelism that strikes me is that Ukraine is a victim of an actual use of force. Is a
Right.
victim of an actual invasion in violation of the UN Charter. The Philippines is a victim of a threat of force,
Right.
which is also in violation of the UN Charter. And both countries are huge. They are nuclear armed powers trying to bully non-nuclear armed countries. And that's the parallelism that I see here. And Ukraine is in the forefront of defending the UN Charter's foundational principle. We are also in the forefront
Yeah.
of defending the UN Charter's foundational principle. That should be the comparison. Not that we are defending our
Puppet
own
regimes
territory and
now. Yeah,
maritime
yeah.
zones,
Yeah.
not because we are being instructed by any imperial power. It's our own agency. We have to defend
Right.
our own territory. I mean, with or without the U.S., we have no choice but to defend our own territory and maritime zones.
I mean, ano bang gusto nilang mangyari na we'll kick out the Americans and then fight with China on our own alone and then rely on a completely useless ASEAN on this issue? I mean, I don't know in which universe do these people exist, but I mean, we can say everything about the U.S. imperialism and all, but clearly it's not U.S. Who's trying to occupy West Philippines here, etc. And to equate EDCA bases with U.S. occupation of the Philippines, I mean, that's quite an interesting, I don't know, parallelism if they want to put it, or stretch, some would say. I mean, what's going on there, Justice Carpio? What's your read of that?
Well, they really don't have any argument anymore except those specious positions that they're putting up. You know, we kick out the Americans, and what happened? Without any American base, without any American EDCA site, China seized Mischief Reef, and China also seized Scarborough Shoal. So the Americans had nothing to do with that. When we were totally defenseless without an American presence here, the Chinese invaded us because Scarborough Shoal is territory. When they took that over, that was an invasion.
Right. Siguro one argument they could make is, oh, you know, China is getting some small islands there, but we're giving the whole Cagayan and all those. Maybe that's their stretch argument too, right? I mean, what's going on here?
Well, just a speck of stone above water high tide generates a 12 nautical mile territorial sea. The radius of that, the area of that, is as large as twice as large as Metro Manila. It's a huge area in terms of territorial sea. So, and China can always build there another artificial island if they want. And that would
Right.
bring China very close to us.
Oh, especially if they occupy Taiwan. I mean, if they invade Taiwan, they're really close to us in a huge island, right? Our entire northern perimeters will be exposed. But just sorry if I'm pushing you on this, but patulan natin for the sake of it. So, the argument I also hear from that side, not the DDS side, but the leftist side or supposed leftist side, is that ang problema is you cannot talk about the Philippine Strategic Agency dahil yung mga liderato natin ay puro mga tuta. Parang, oh, maasa ka kay Marcos to reassert Philippine sovereignty. What strategic agency you're talking about? So, Jessica, what would you say to that argument that we don't have an elite which can stand up to the U.S. and make sure we leverage the alliance without ending up as American proxy or puppet or something like that? What do you say to that argument?
Well, when China seized the Scarborough Shoal, on our own, we went to The Hague. We filed the arbitration case. The Americans didn't even know about it. We kept it away from the Americans because we didn't want anything to leak. And we were very careful that we did not alert the Americans that we were about to file. They didn't. In fact, they discouraged us. They were not too happy about that. So I mean, we did that on our own. And the Americans don't have any influence. They're not even a member of UNCLOS. So these leftists are saying that, that's the UNCLOS tribunal is controlled by the Americans. It cannot be. The Americans don't even have a representative in the ITLOS, in the United Nations Tribunal of the Law of the Sea.
And
So,
clearly, they don't
and,
control ICC or ICJ, which is going after their key ally, special friend in the Middle East, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's why they're sanctioning those bodies or threatening to, right? So I think the problem with them is they're still stuck in the 1960s when, yes, US back then was sponsoring coups right and left across developing world and doing horrible things. I think what they miss is that today's China is more like the US of 1960s. It's kind of a new rising hegemon which doesn't give a heck to democracy or the most domestic institutions. I mean, kailangan ko, gusto ko lang patulan itong mga argument na to kasi grabe dagsaan ng comments when I posted about Zelenskyy and Marcos. There's a term, Gen Z term, triggered. Marami na trigger doon sa mga post kong ganyan.
Well, they can say what they want, but the reality is we are the subject. We are the victim of aggression. Ukraine is the victim of aggression. It's very clear. We are not stepping on a single square inch of Chinese territory. They're trying to seize all our island territories in the West Philippine Sea. How could any Filipino say we are wrong in defending our own territory? I mean, if you look at the Ukraine, how can you say that the Ukrainians are wrong in defending their territory against invasion? It's the right of every nation to defend its own territory. I mean, it's just impossible. That's why they can never convince people.
Well, except, maybe the 3 or 4% who are still. But, I think their argument here is that defensive yung moves ng Russia. Because if Ukraine had joined NATO, blah, 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 then Russia would be surrounded completely by NATO members, blah, blah, blah. And then we are encircling China with AUKUS and JAFUS and Squad and all. So kawawa naman ng China, inaapi natin sila. I mean, it takes quite a leap of imagination to see China and Russia as victims. Considering how powerful China especially is. Russia, we can have a conversation about that.
Well, it's not much. Ukraine doesn't have a single nuclear bomb, and Russia has about
more than 1,000 at least.
Yeah, 10,000 at least. So close to 6,000. So why are they worried? How can a nation like Russia, with the largest nuclear stockpile in the world, be worried about countries like Ukraine, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, when they don't even have a single nuclear bomb?
Yeah. The only way I would agree with them is this, that a democratic, successful, prosperous Ukraine would be a threat to Putin's regime, right? Because it will tell the Russian people that, oh, look at our Slavic brothers. They're going first world. We're still stuck here. And to China and the Communist Party of China, who is really doesn't have any credibility as a communist power, but has all the credibility as a powerful nationalist power, we are also a threat to Xi Jinping's regime, right? Because if we expose China for what it is and resist China, that's not going to look good to the Chinese people domestically, right? So in that sense, maybe we're not a threat to China and Russia, but we are a threat to the authoritarian leaders in charge of these countries, right? I mean, that's how I can see how we are a threat to these countries. Kaya triggered sila.
Well, the way I look at it, President Xi has claimed, he claimed credit for the Chinese expansion in the South China Sea. And
Sure.
He has a lot of problems, domestic problems now, because of the economy of China is in a downturn now. A lot of people unemployed, their youth a huge army of young Chinese are
Yeah.
unemployed. So
They even
how
stop
do you?
releasing. Sorry, just got forget. Just for people to realize, the Chinese National Labor Statistics Office has stopped releasing data on youth unemployment. It's so bad
Yeah,
they
that's
just don't
right.
want to release anymore. That's how bad the situation is. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So how do you prevent these young people from going against the government by creating an outside enemy?
Yeah.
I think that's what presidency is doing.
But that's why, Justice Carpio, I ask you, hindi ba nakakabahala na parang kino-corner na nila yung sarili nila? I mean, aren't you worried that China might end up, again just to be clear, I'm not fear-mongering here. I'm not trying to amplify pero minsan din napapaisip ako, baka naman maging desperado na itong China na to eh. Kasi, di ba, they created their own problem. They demonized everyone else. Nag-stand up sa kanila, and then they create this notion na sa kanila lahat tong West Philippine Sea at South China Sea. And now, they're hitting a wall. That's why I'm saying, hindi ba nakakabala na they might end up doing something funny? Or
Well,
we just have to be careful lang, but not panic.
I think they will not they will not do anything that will trigger a war because
Yeah.
that's against their doctrine. I mean, they their three warfare doctrine is that they will win the South China Sea without going to war, without firing a single shot even. So uh, I think their problem is this: they're trying to grab the maritime zones, the island territories of all the coastal countries. And there is no way that these coastal countries in the South China will give in. Nobody will give in, even not even Vietnam. It has a long border boundary with China, but it will not give up its maritime zones. So unless China accepts international law on how the maritime zones are settled, China will never be trusted by these countries.
Now, good transition to the latter part of our episode, Justice Carpio. I just want to ask you on this. One area though where China is hurting us is through this. I don't know if I can still call it gray zone because they're injuring already our servicemen and damaging our vessels and ship and degrading our supply capabilities. So nasaan na tayo dito sa gray zone tactics naman ng China at anong direction natin ngayon? At most recently we had this incident whereby they're even intercepting yung mga supply natin, and we had to use fast speed boats. Nasaan po tayo ngayon dun sa baba in terms of the fight on the ground right now, tactically speaking? Yeah.
Well, you will recall that the former commander of the Indo-Pacific Forces testified before the U.S. Congress that he said that if the use of water cannon will result in the death of Philippine Coast Guard personnel or Philippine Navy personnel, then that could trigger the operation of the Mutual Defense Treaty. And President Marcos
Marcos, yeah,
Jr.
also, yeah.
reiterated that in
It's a red
Shangri-La.
line. Yeah, yeah.
So I think we're developing a new interpretation of what is needed to trigger the
Right.
Mutual Defense Treaty. That it need not be an armed attack. You can use water cannon; it's not considered armed. But if it results in a death, then it can trigger the treaty. That is really addressed to the gray zone operations of
Right.
China. In other words, you conduct gray zone operations, but if it results in a death of a Philippine
Yes.
Coast Guard personnel or Philippine Navy personnel, then the treaty will apply. So that
Interesting.
is the deterrence now. China will have to take this into consideration every time it uses its gray zone tactics. They will have to be careful that a Filipino Navy or Coast Guard personnel will not die, and so they will have to be careful. And I think it's a very good policy. I can see that the U.S.
Interesting.
started that, and we echoed that. We said, okay, in effect, we agree to that when President Marcos Jr. Mentioned that in the Shangri-La speech. No, so we are addressing the gray zone tactics in that
Interesting.
way.
So what you're saying is that now we have moved into an output rather than modality-oriented understanding of the parameters of mutual defense treaty, right? Because when you talk about gray zone, it's really modality, right? Na hindi ka
Yeah.
gumagamit ng naval firepower, you're just using your, I don't know, Coast Guard, whatever. But now, ang sinasabi natin is, wala akong pake anong ginagamit mo if you end up killing someone belonging to the Philippine Armed Forces or using a public vessels, then you're gonna... so this is a radical reinterpretation, right, of the parameters
Yes.
in a
Yeah.
sense that
I see.
we're allowing them not to use the modality self if effacement. We're
Yeah.
looking at the output here. Very good point,
Yeah.
Justice Carpio. I agree with you on that. Yeah.
Yeah. This will really address the gray zone tactic.
Right.
This will address because they will be careful in firing the water cannon now. That water cannon is a very strong pressure. When it hits your chest, you could die. So they will now be very careful.
Yeah, I mean, I mean that's why I asked the Commodore Trinidad. I mean, if this was a punching power, is this Tyson or Pacquiao? He said the two combined, and we know that Tyson alone could kill people with a punch, right? So imagine Tyson and Pacquiao together, right? So that just tells you that masyadong limited kung titignan lang natin ano yung ginagamit ng China. Dapat titignan din natin yung epekto nito. I.e., kung
Yes, that's
pumapatay ito
correct.
ng mga Pilipino or something like that. So now you're telling China, oh, be careful with what you're doing here because I know you have been playing around the law. You're looking at the gray zone in the law, but we're also looking at the effect of what you're doing. So if something goes wrong here, it's on you. Even if may palusot ka na hindi ka gumagamit ng firepower or military in a strict sense of the word. That's a very good point. And and do you think we will see indications that China is going to recalibrate in the coming months? Because
Yeah,
there's another angle. Just sorry, the other angle I'm hearing is, eto na, Baguio season na. May excuse ng China na hindi na maghanas dyan.
yeah. Well, that's why I'm looking at what China will do now because they've been warned already by by the U.S. and by the Philippines, and this is now official reinterpretation of the Mutual Defense Treaty when it will be triggered. And I think this is a
Yeah, very good point.
very good deterrent to the gray zone tactics of China.
Thank you for that. And I'm hopeful that China will be rational enough to see the wisdom of not continuing with its current course. What is the reasonable de-escalation you can see here? Because President Marcos Jr. is also indicating, and this is the context that also of our conversation before this episode of the record was, etong threat for the Philippines to go for additional legal warfare. For President Marcos Jr. to talk about relevant provisions of international law, treaties, even historical maps, etc. Which I think is something that went down with you, Justice Carpio. So pasado sa Carpio index, right? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, the Chinese have said repeatedly. You go to their website in the local in the local embassy of China and their foreign ministry, and in their submission to the arbitration in The Hague, they said Philippine territory is governed by three treaties, and all islands outside the Paris Treaty lines do not belong to the Philippines. Because
Yeah.
that he said that is your treat. Those are the treaties that regulate. Mali sila eh. Because the Treaty of Washington says any and all islands belonging to the Philippine archipelago lying outside the lines were also ceded to the U.S. by Spain. But the problem is our own public intellectuals in the Philippines, like Stelito Mendoza, he wrote an article in the Philda Journal that Philippine territory is limited to the islands within the Paris Treaty lines. And this was echoed by Dean Father Bernas of the Ateneo Law School, and also lately
Right.
by by Senator Enrile, who's now the Presidential Legal Counsel, and that's why the Chinese have been saying, "Oh, Philippine territory is limited to the islands within the
I
treaty
see.
lines," which is factually, legally, and historically false,
So,
wrong.
so may mali din
So,
tayo on our side. So we have to call that out. Thank you for calling it out. Yeah.
yeah, that's why I've been saying our narrative is completely wrong. We have to be on the same page. We must know what's our narrative,
Right.
and that is why I've been giving lectures on this. That we have to correct this. I call this the greatest misconception in Philippine history.
Right.
That Philippine territory is limited to the treaty lines, to the islands within the treaty lines of Paris. That was exactly. Uh, Altered, amended by the Treaty of Washington of 1900, 2 years after the 1898 Treaty of Paris. They amended it and to say that it also included, because when the Americans arrived in the Philippines, they found out that there were many islands of the Philippine archipelago lying outside the lines. And in Cebuto, Cagayan de Sulu, the Spanish garrisons refused to vacate because they said we're outside the treaty lines. And that's why they had to sign that second treaty. And the U.S. had to pay an additional $100,000 for the second treaty to clarify that the cession included everything else, all the islands of the Philippine archipelago. And if you look at the map of 1734, the first official map of Philippine territory under the Spanish regime, Scarborough Shoal and the Spanish are part of Philippine territory until the last official map of 1875. The last official map
Right.
of the Philippine territory under the Spanish regime was the 1875 Carta General, the Archipelago Filipino, map of the Philippine archipelago. And it shows there Scarborough Shoal, very clear, Scarborough Shoal. And the Spratlys are part of Philippine territory. It has names. Tito Island, that's the name. It's there. Ituaba is there. So,
But Justice, where the heck is this coming from? Because Mendoza, he was there at the forefront of our efforts to rally archipelagic states during the UNCLOS negotiation. I think this is UNCLOS two. JPE, I mean, another supposedly smart lawyer, was part of the Marcos Senior regime, and the Marcos Senior regime was actually the one that really helped us consolidate our position on the ground. So what the heck is going on here? Is there something
well,
else happening here that I don't know?
they forgot about the 1900 Treaty of Washington. They forgot
Yeah.
that there was a second treaty to correct the errors in the Treaty of Paris. But we were never taught that. We were always taught the Treaty
Of
of
Paris, yeah, and yung square na totally
Yes,
ridiculous in
and
international
the
law, yeah,
lines,
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
famous lines. But those famous lines have actually been amended by the Treaty of Washington.
Right.
But we forgot all about that. And our legal luminaries have been saying this, that we're limited to the islands within the
Yeah.
treaty lines. And so the Chinese hear this and they say,
It's music
oh,
to their ear, yeah.
yeah.
Um,
That's
um,
exactly what Wang Yi, he spoke at the CSIS in Washington, D.C., and before diplomats from all over the world. He said, Philippine territory is governed by the Treaty of Paris, the Treaty of Washington, and the Treaty with the British, and all islands outside the treaty lines do not belong to the Philippines. I mean, because he
yeah.
followed the Estelito Mendoza, Father Bernas, and Senator Enrile, and everybody else who kept on pointing to the treaty lines, and even our friends in the left who are defending China, that China owns the Spratlys and Scarborough Shoal. That's their point also.
Yeah. Well, I know personally na may ganyan strategy in China na hanapin nila some statement by some North Vietnamese official when Vietnam was desperately in need of Chinese help. They
Yes.
said maybe something that relevant, and then they're gonna extrapolate that and then excavate that and then say, oh, see, you Vietnamese are saying that. So that's what I'm saying. Dapat ingat yung mga tao nandito sa Pilipinas who have some stature and our thought leaders, because gagamitin ng China against ourselves. So, Justice Carl, do you think there should be a floor here in terms of, like I don't go around the region and hear, I don't know, in Singapore, people arguing against their own territorial integrity at, to the benefit of Malaysia or Indonesia. I don't go to Vietnam nowadays hearing someone saying, oh, no, this is for China. Only in the Philippines I hear that. What the heck is going on here?
Yeah, I think we have to have a common narrative already. We have to because it's also in the Constitution of 1935. Our territory is governed by treaties, but people just look at the Treaty of Paris. They don't bother looking at the Treaty of Washington, which is very clear. The text of the Treaty of Washington says any and all islands belonging to the Philippine archipelago lying outside the lines of the Treaty of Paris. So it's very clear that Philippine territory is not limited to the islands within the treaty lines. But they have forgotten about that. I mean, I don't know. And we have misled China. And because of that, China said, oh, those islands are outside the 118 degrees
Yeah.
longitude in the West Philippine Sea. So these islands do not belong to you. That's why
I mean,
I
I'm
was very happy when President Marcos
Marcus,
Jr.
yes, yes.
stated that in the Shangri-La speech, that our territory is not governed only by the Treaty of Paris, but also by the Treaty of Washington, which includes islands that transcend the treaty lines, that go beyond the treaty lines. I was so happy about that because this is the first time that there was an official statement by
Right.
any president of the Philippines that we are not limited to the treaty lines because that is historically, legally, and factually correct.
You think the
And I hope
commander-in-chief
that
should call out?
our legal luminaries,
Yeah.
like Estelito Mendoza, like Enrile, well, Father Verdes, that those who are still living should correct it because
Yeah.
we have to be on the same page. I think it's their duty to our country, to present and future generations of Filipinos, that they must correct this. And I'm very happy that officially that is now the position, because that's an official statement of the chief architect of foreign policy,
Right.
the president.
Yeah, but the reason I say there should be a floor is because paano kung biglang iba na yung chief architect? I mean, the vice president comes from a totally different persuasion from my understanding. So, how do we create that? Are you going to write an article about this dun sa column nyo? Justice Inquirer? Just, I think it
Well,
will help.
I
Yeah,
have,
yeah.
I've been giving a lecture on this already.
Yeah, but
and I'm uploading it soon
please,
in
please,
YouTube.
yeah, so that I can also share with folks
Yeah.
para basahin din nila. I really appreciate the reiteration and all. I mean, I am troubled to see that some people of certain stature are spreading potentially misinformation. Definitely not disinformation, but misinformation could also undermine our national interests, and that's something important.
But there's another thing, Richard.
Yes,
Our friends
Justice.
in the left are saying that the Japan Taipei Treaty of 1952 awarded the Paracels, the Spratlys, and Scarborough Shoal to China. There's no such thing because the Treaty of Taipei came 1 year after the Treaty of San Francisco. The main treaty was the San Francisco Peace Conference Treaty, where the motion of the USSR to award the Paracels and Spratlys to China was defeated overwhelmingly by 46 to 3, I think. So in the final text of the Treaty of San Francisco, they said Japan renounced its claim to the Spratlys and the Paracels, period. There was no
Yeah,
award.
no handing over to China or anyone. Exactly, you're right. Tama lang yung first part, but there's no misinformation na yan. Yeah.
And in the Treaty of Taipei 1 year later, because China was not represented in the San Francisco Peace Conference because there was a civil war. But the Americans told the Japanese, you have to sign a separate treaty with the Republic of China in Taiwan, in Taipei. So they signed, and that treaty says, in accordance with the Treaty of San Francisco of 1951, the Japan renounces its claim to the Spratlys and the Paracels. Period. There was no award,
Yeah.
and the Japan could not have given the Spratlys and the Paracels to Taiwan because it already renounced its claim 1 year earlier. I don't know why Filipinos keep on saying that in the Treaty of Taipei, Japan awarded the Paracels and the Spratlys to China. It's really a complete nonsense. It's totally contrary to the facts and the law.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying talagang kailangan natin, we have to fight strongly against misinformation and disinformation on this because the Chinese keep on relitigating this case, right? Going back to it, distorting things, kind of like Trump relitigating his own case recently. Oh, the judge was questionable. Oh, the DOJ was, they keep on doing that. So it's very important we have a strong grip on the basic facts. Last point, Justice Carpio, obviously, I want to come back to you later on also in this month because this is a National Independence Month, our national flag and everything like that. So there are lots of things going on right now. Let me ask you, Justice Carpio, nasan ulit si Kibuloy? Just kidding. Justice Carpio, what do you think should happen? I mean, finally, we have a president again who's saying sensible things, right? He's Ferdinand Marcos Jr., so obviously my baggage dyan. Finally, the Philippines is making a strong stance on this issue. But obviously, you need a whole of nation approach, right? If the Philippines wants to stand a chance in the West Philippine Sea and also as a rising middle power in the 21st century. What do you want to happen in the Philippines in the coming years, Justice Carpio? Ano mga kailangan gawin? Anong dapat na mga gagawin ng mga thought leaders, influential people, scholars, and policymakers to make sure na we have a floor. We have a floor na hindi mambo-jumbo lang sinasabi ng iba dyan at we don't litigate the case against ourselves or relitigate the case and history against ourselves. I mean, this is a weird situation we have in the Philippines.
Well, the number one thing is what I said earlier, that we must have a common narrative on what is our territory. I mean, that's basic. For a state.
Facts-based narrative, not just a
fact-based.
narrative. Yeah.
It's basic that we must know the extent of our territory. We should not be quarreling whether this island belongs to the Philippines or not. We should be on one page. And because if we are not united here, if some people, some Philippines will say, no, we don't own the spot list, China will use that against us.
Yeah.
And it's using it against us. So to win against China, we must be on the same page as to what is the extent of Philippine territory. It's so basic, Richard. A state is composed of one, territory, people, government, sovereignty. If we don't know our territory, why do we call ourselves a state? Let us be one. Let us decide what exactly is the Philippine
Let us
territory.
be province of China. I mean, Justice Carpio, come on. I mean, we had a very good proposal by the former President Digong. So I want to end on this note because how important it is for us to elect the right people to government, including these upcoming 2025 elections. Because a number of people so far within the Magic 12 of surveys, SWS, are notoriously silent on the West Philippine Sea, or even worse, they have been purveyors of Chinese disinformation against the Philippine national interest. How important is for people to fight the good fight? Are we going to see Team Philippines versus Team China in 2025 elections? Sorry for putting you on the spot, but I think we're getting near to the election season, so I think we have to ask these questions.
Well, that's why it's very important that we have to put the West Philippines issue as part of the election issue.
Yeah.
If we have to ask every candidate to the Senate, what is your position on the West Philippine Sea? We have to ask them.
Well, I'm sure the others would
But,
say,
but,
yeah.
but we have to be careful. Somebody might say, "Oh, I will ride a jet ski and I will plant a flag and I will challenge the Chinese guard to a duel." I mean, we have to be careful with people like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure some other person would say, well, nagsuot naman ako ng West Philippine Sea shirt nung Gilas Pilipinas laban sa China sa FIBA World Cup. So kalimutan nyo na lahat ng mga pro-Tatay Digong na sinabi ko. And then we have some of the other ones who was the political advisor of Digong and now suddenly pro-Quad and pro-West Philippine Sea. But Justice, you said naman, di ba, we'll take any friend we can get. So, I don't know, you're maybe more I don't know, forgiving than me. Pero ako naman, ayoko lang mabudol tayo ulit, di ba? Come this elections na naman, di ba?
Well, I don't want to be told again that pag naniwala kayo sa akin, stupid kayo.
I like the honesty. I mean, he's honest, right? I'm just saying, there's always the option of being province of China, as the great former President Duterte said. So, Justice Carpio, don't worry too much. Wag na natin pag-usapan itong kasaysayan natin and everything like that. Thank you so much, Justice Carpio. I'm sorry we started a little bit late. I think there was a slight miscommunication on what exact time we were going to start. But I really appreciate Justice Carpio. please continue to take care of yourself, your health, your well-being, and your power and strength, because your passion is very inspiring. And I'll tell you, Justice Carpio, I think people really appreciate also this more casual side of you, kasi parati nila nakikita yung very, juridically appropriate version. So please keep your humor also, Justice Carpio. Mabuhay po kayo, and thank you so much, and hope we can have you back soon on our different
Sure,
platforms.
anytime, Richard. Yeah, thank you also, Richard. Thank you to our viewers.
Pleasure po. God bless. Talk to you soon po. Alright guys, thank you so much. Maraming salamat sa lahat na nanonood sa atin. Actually, I was hoping to actually start a little bit earlier. Baka nagsabayan na tayo ng mga kabilang channel, but I don't care. Kausap lang naman natin, isa sa mga pinaka-patriot natin na talagang may alam, may pake dito sa West Philippine Sea issue. So please, spread the good words and fight against those who are spreading disinformation, misinformation on the West Philippine Sea to the interest, for the interest of China. All right? Tuloy-tuloy lang itong gagawin natin. This is our own little advocacy. Hindi lang tayo nagpapakyut tayo dito. We're also talking about our national interests and how to fight for our national interests. So please, continue to support us. Watch and share yung mga episodes na gusto nyo, especially kung kausap natin yung mga katulad ni Justice Carpio. Upload ko naman ito. Don't worry about it. This is just a, backroom kind of BTS, behind the scenes version. But we're gonna upload the actual one. Also, of course, yung kay Ronald Llamas, yung episodes din natin about Hernan Luna, Rizal, Emilio Jacinto. We're gonna also upload that. I just need a bit time to edit them and all. Pasensya na, wala naman. Alam naman, sariling sikap ito. So thank you so much, guys, and please continue to support us. Yung ating podcast has reached its all-time high in terms of daily listening. Hindi naman ganun kalaki, medyo maliit-liit pa. But we need to continue that kind of momentum para the algorithm will continue to recommend us para people. Para yung mga tao, mahinig naman sa atin, hindi lang dun sa mga fake news and mga japakes at mga, entertainment is great, but you want to also have information. You want to have a little bit of patriotic understanding what's happening in the country. So please, continue to like and support us and share the word, spread the word, and not disinformation. And please, rate us. Really appreciate it. We want to hope to reach the 1K rating dun sa Spotify and at least 50 to 200 on Apple Podcast para ma-reflect din ito dun sa sa page natin and all. And of course, itong YouTube, Facebook, libre lang mag-like, mag-follow para tuloy-tuloy lang itong momentum natin. On that note, thank you very much. God bless and talk to you soon.